Everything was fine. I poured my entire retirement savings in my apartment, my life's worth of deposits into my children. Do you know what I received in return? My siblings toured each other to do visit during the holidays, and
Wife collapsed from stress. The saying that children won't visit if their parents have nothing. Why did I hear that so late? As everyone else died, we became a burden instead. I never once imagined that my retirement would be ruined because of my children. I painfully realized just how naive that thought was. This is the confession of a father who lost his entire retirement in the name of love, and a record of his resolute struggle to reclaim his shattered life. Before I begin, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. This is a channel that delivers the hidden stories of ordinary people every day. Hello, I am Park Jun-ho, 65 years old this year. I stand at the tail end of the so-called baby boom generation and in the very heart of the March generation. The March generation. The last generation to support their parents, and the first generation that will not be supported by their children. I don't know who coined that phrase, but it felt like it was exactly my story. It seems my life spent running forward, without looking back, has become precisely stuck between those gears. Others told me that at this age it is time to take it easy and rest. However, even at this age, I have never once had a moment of peace. I worked for a mid-sized construction company for 32 years. When I went to the site, I breathed in sandstorms, and you stood under the scorching sun in the summer and had my hands and feet frozen in the winter, yet I just endured it. All with the sole thought of providing for my family. That was the way of my generation, to just silently and steadfastly hold on without complaint. 5 years ago, I retired from the company I had worked for after 32 years. On the day of my retirement, my colleagues thoughtfully arranged a farewell party for me. I received flowers, applause, and words of thanks for my hard work. Strangely enough, however, tears welled up in my eyes on the subway ride home. At the time, I couldn't quite tell if I was happy or sad. Looking back now, I think I vaguely knew that the most solid period of my life had ended on that day. The losses I incurred upon retirement were my severance pay of 100 million won, a 700 million won apartment in Gwangyang, Gyeonggi province, and 300 million won in savings that my wife had accumulated penny by penny for over 30 years. Combined, it is not a small amount of money. I thought so, too. I thought this was enough. That living a simple life with my wife and taking care of my mother in the countryside would be sufficient. Actually, I had a dream, too. Among the friends I joined the company with, there was a friend named Lee Guangsu. As soon as he retired, he went on a trip to Europe with his wife. He posted photos in our group chat. There was a picture taken in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and another taken at a lake somewhere in Switzerland. This is what I mean to list. Another friend, Kim Young-tae, fell in love with golf after retiring. He said he goes out to the course at least twice a month, telling me, "Do you know there is nothing like golf after retirement? It feels like living life over again. Let's play golf together as couples sometime." I said, I too dreamed of such a retirement. A day where I walked hand in hand with my wife somewhere abroad, occasionally played golf with friends, and leisurely enjoyed a cup of coffee. It wasn't such a grand dream, was it? I thought that having worked hard for 32 years, I deserved to enjoy at least that much. For a while after retiring, things were truly wonderful. Sleeping in late in the mornings, taking walks around the neighborhood with my wife, and reading books for the first time. In a long while, it wasn't anything extraordinary, but I enjoyed those small, simple days. Occasionally, I would travel to nearby places with my wife and attend couples golf gatherings. It was truly joyful and happy. I also learned a lot from my mother when I made sure to go down to the countryside once a month. I told her several times that I wanted to bring her to our home. However, she adamantly shook her head. "I like it here. This is where I've lived my whole life. Why should I go anywhere else at my age? I have relatives and neighbors here. If I go to where you live, I'll feel more uncomfortable." At those words, I had nothing more to say, so I had no choice but to go down there myself. Once a month was all I could do. That simple and peaceful daily life didn't last as long as I had expected. It was about 3 years after I retired. One ordinary afternoon while I was having dinner, I received a call from my son Junseo. Dad, I have something to tell you. I'll stop by home soon. We have one son and one daughter. My son Junseo is 32 and my daughter. Junseo graduated from college, worked at a few small and medium-sized companies, and said he wanted to start his own business after getting married. Jaeyeon married early and was managing the household while raising 2 children. I thought I had raised my 2 children without lacking anything. I helped them graduate from college and supported them fully when they got married. The moment I answered the phone, a sense of foreboding swept over me. However, I ignored that feeling. Parents are always like that. They try their best not to even consider the possibility that their children might go astray. That is a form of parental love, but sometimes it can also become their greatest weakness. Just like me, in my life, I had never once thought that my retirement would collapse because of my children. I used to tell myself that my children were different, that my kids wouldn't do that. Now I realize just how naive that thought was. It was 3 days after I received the phone call that my son, Junseo, came home, leaving a deep, painful ache in my heart. My daughter-in-law, Sujin, was with him. The two sat side by side on the sofa, holding a single document envelope, looking as if they had prepared something in advance. That bothered me a little. It seemed like they hadn't just come to talk, but had come with solid preparations. Father, I want to try starting a business, was the first thing Junseo said. A business? Yes, a bakery cafe. Properly made cafes and bakeries are becoming incredibly popular among young people these days. I've been doing market research for a few years, and you have a baking and pastry license, Sujin. I think it will go well if we do it together. What he pulled out of the envelope was a business plan. It looked like he had prepared quite a substantial amount of it. Location, analysis of projected revenue, initial investment cost. While Junseo was Sujin chimed in from the side. Father, if you look at the trending cafes on social media these days, people line up to get into the bakery cafes with good interiors. Business is really booming. We can do that too. Junseo chimed in as well. Dad, now is the opportunity. Honestly, I was glad first. When Junseo was working at the company, he always said it was hard and didn't suit his aptitude. So the fact that he had found something to do wasn't a bad thing. However, a realistic question suddenly popped into my head. Junseo hesitated for a moment, mentioning that he was interested in starting a business, then said, "So, Dad, I need about 300 million won for initial capital. Can you help me out?" 300. The moment I heard that number, my heart sank. Where is that going to come from? Are you asking us for it? Dad, I'll look into whether I can get a loan. I didn't answer immediately that day. After sending Junseo and his wife away, my wife and I talked for a long time. I was on the opposite side. Business isn't as easy as it sounds. What if it goes wrong? But my wife said, honey, what good is it to give it to them after we're gone? Let's help them establish themselves while they're still young. After all, we're going to give it all to them once we're gone. Those words swayed my heart. She wasn't wrong. They said that since we weren't going to take it anyway, wouldn't it be better to help him while he was still alive? At that time, those words sounded so warm and true. Looking back now, however, that was the biggest mistake of our lives. I agonized over it for a few more days. During that time, Junseo contacted me almost every day. Father, a good opportunity has opened up. If we don't grab it now, it will go to someone else. Father, this opportunity is absolutely certain. Please trust us just this once. My daughter-in-law Sujin also sent a separate text message. Father, we will work really hard. What? We will definitely repay you with filipiety later. As those words piled up, my heart began to lean in. Let's trust him just this once. Surely our Junseo won't go wrong. He must have prepared thoroughly. With my daughter-in-law making such a promise, my wife and I eventually made a decision. After discussing it this year, we decided to gift the property to him. We transferred the apartment in Gwangmyeong into Junseo's name. Junseo took out a loan using it as collateral, paid the gift tax, and raised the capital to start a bakery cafe. However, a problem arose. I received a call from my daughter, Jian. Dad, what about me? You gave the apartment to my brother. What about me? My son-in-law is struggling right now, too. Raising 2 kids costs a lot of money, but Mom and Dad don't think about my brother and don't think about me. My heart sank at that moment. I couldn't just give it to one child. I discussed it with my wife for a long time again. In the end, we decided to give Jihyun the 300 million won in savings my wife had accumulated. So we gave the Gwangmyeong apartment to our son and the 300 million won in cash to our daughter. My wife and I liquidated our remaining severance pay and stocks to downsize and moved to a 15-pai Ayong apartment. On the day we moved, as we took one last look around the empty apartment, my wife linked arms with me. Honey, we did the right thing, didn't we? If the kids do well, isn't that our happiness, huh? She asked what use a big house was, since it was just the 2 of us living there anyway. I thought so too at the time. My heart even felt warm with pride that I had paved the way for my children's futures. But then, a few days after we moved, I received a text message from my son. Dad, I signed a contract for a cafe. Don't worry, everything will be fine. There was no contact from my daughter. Not a single phone call came from Jihyun since the day I received the 300 million won in cash. That was when it all began. A feeling that something was wrong started to settle in a corner of my heart, and that feeling became reality much sooner than I had anticipated. After receiving the text message saying the cafe contract had been signed, I spent a while praying. I prayed that it would go well. I prayed that Junseo would really settle down this time. My wife felt the same way. Honey, they say cafe business is good these days. Junseo will do well. We comforted each other like that. The cafe opened about 2 months after the contract was signed. I received a call from Junseo. Dad opened it. Come visit with Mom. My wife and I went there with high hopes. The cafe was larger than we had expected. The first floor was the bakery space, and the second floor was the cafe hall. The interior was also neatly and well done. Since it was the first day of opening, there were quite a few customers. Junseo greeted me with an angry laugh, and Sujin was wearing an apron, carrying bread. Watching them, my heart swelled with emotion. Yes, this is it. If things go well like this, that's all that matters. But that was the end of it. That day was the last day I was happiest at the cafe. The problem erupted from an unexpected place. About 3 months after opening the cafe, I received a call from my daughter, Jiyeon. Dad, I have something to tell you. Did you see your cafe? Yeah, I went. It was doing well. That looks good to you, Dad. Do you know how much the apartment you received is worth now? The current market price for an apartment in Gwangwon is over 800 million, but I received 300 million won in cash. After paying gift tax, I actually have less than 250 million won in my hand. But your apartment keeps going up. Isn't this fair? I was speechless for a moment. Jian, that was all Dad had back then. As for the apartment, Junseo is your brother, and he is the eldest son of our family. Though since my brother is the eldest son, he was given an apartment that grows in value, while I only received cash that is gone unspent. Why are Dad and Mom always on my brother's side? After hanging up, I sat there in a daze for a while. When I told my wife about it, she sighed too. What did we do wrong? We gave away everything we had. But that was just the beginning. A few days later, I received a call from Junseo. Dad, honestly, I'm having a hard time these days. Jaeyeon keeps bringing up the apartment, and I feel so wronged. Do you know how much the gift tax alone was when I took over the apartment? I even took out a loan to pay the tax, but Jaeyeon doesn't even think about that. On top of that, I spent extra money on interior renovations to open the cafe. On top of that, I have to hire staff, and the cost of materials is higher than I expected. So, Dad, could you please help me? Just a little bit more of Wushu? I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't readily understand why he was asking for help again when I had already handed over the apartment. Junseo, Dad has nothing left now. Just a little bit, Dad. If we just get through this hurdle, things will really work out well. I realize that complacency becomes the most dangerous poison in front of one's children. It seems that if parents possess something, it all looks like their own to their children. That's all well and good. Even my entire fortune, accumulated over a lifetime of work, apparently wasn't enough. I never realized my children were so greedy, or perhaps I knew, but I simply didn't want to believe it. That day, after hanging up the phone, I sat on the sofa for a long time. As I looked out the window, a notification popped up in our group chat. My friend Guangsu had posted a photo. It was a picture of a Japanese schoolhouse drying its leaves. This place is really nice. Let's come back next year, couples. I stared at that photo for a long time. The friend I had endured 32 years with was currently in Japan admiring the autumn foliage, while I sat on the sofa, breathing a sigh of relief at my children's phone call. I wondered how people who had lived through the same time could be so different. The word bitter was insufficient to describe the feeling. Not long after, the two siblings contacted me simultaneously. Junseo said to his father, "I can't live like this either because Jian keeps bringing up the apartment," to which Jian replied, "Dad, you're older. Brother completely ignores me, asking why I'm talking about an apartment when you received cash." My wife and I were right in the middle of our children's fight. We never dreamed that dividing our assets would become the knife that splits them apart. Around that time, things began to change. In the past, the two families would gather during the holidays and have a warm, cozy time together. But now, Jun, Sionai, and Jion avoided each other, coming on the same day. Eventually, we reached the point where we spent the holidays separately, watching the siblings avoid eye contact even in front of their parents. I could not swallow my food. I thought the house would be filled with laughter on the day we divided the assets. However, all I heard was the sharp sound of a calculator. The gratitude did not last even a single day. The children began spewing insults while comparing only the size of the rice cakes on each other's palms, and the sparks of that fight flew directly at my wife and me. It's about a year after we opened the cafe. The tone of the messages I received from Junseo began to change little by little. At first it was, "Dad, things are going well. The waiting lines are insane." I asked, "What did I do?" "You told me it was doing well." But at some point, the tone shifted to, "Dad, things are a bit tough these days." Running a cafe turned out to have far more variables than I had imagined. If a new cafe opened nearby, customers would drop, and if an employee suddenly quit, Junze and his wife had to handle everything by themselves, working from dawn till night. On top of that, there were the apartment mortgage, interest payments. The sense of ease gradually faded. Then, one day, Junseo showed up unexpectedly. He was alone without Sujin. He sat on the sofa and remained silent for a while. "Junseo, what's wrong?" I asked. "Dad, the cafe isn't doing well. We missed the loan interest this month and we barely managed to pay the staff salaries." My heart sank. "So, Dad, could you please help us just a little more? I think if we can just get through this hurdle, we can really establish ourselves." I remained silent right there for a long time. All that remained for my wife and me was our 15p apartment. We had handed over the Tochipak apartment in Kwakang and given away our savings, leaving us with no cash in hand. Our monthly pension was everything. That was our last reserve for our retirement. "Junseo, this time you try to make it work." Junseo stood up without a word. From that day on, all contact from Junseo was cut off. It was the same with my daughter-in-law, Sujin. Even when the holidays approached, she didn't reach out first. When I called my son first, he would say, "Oh, my father is busy. I'll come later." That later never came. My daughter, Jian, was no different. After receiving the 300 million One in cash, she would contact me occasionally. However, after we had a huge fight over the apartment, even that became infrequent. I could only barely see her. Once in a while if I reached out, first because I wanted to see my grandchild's face. It was a Sunday afternoon. My wife and I were having dinner together when she spoke quietly. Honey, I feel like we've become invisible to the kids. I couldn't stand a word in response to those words. After all, they weren't wrong. After giving away all our assets, we were slowly fading from our children's lives. Around that time, I made a resolution. I felt I couldn't just stay at home. I hated spending my days waiting for my children to call. I felt like I needed to do something to survive. I started working as a security guard at an apartment complex. At first, my wife tried to dissuade me. Honey, what are you doing as a security guard at your age? What will people say? I replied. No matter what people say, I have to keep moving to keep my spirits up. The security job was tougher than I had imagined. I had to clock in at 6 a.m. and clock out at 6 a.m. the next day. In winter, I had to shovel snow even when my hands were freezing. In spring, I had to sweep off falling flower petals all day long. I had to deal with complaints day and night. And in summer, I had to sit in a guard room without air conditioning. Still, having endured working on construction sites, there was nothing I couldn't handle. However, sometimes, when I saw other residents leaving with golf bags, I found myself averting my gaze for no reason. That day, on the bus ride home from work, I stared out the window for a long time. I had endured for 32 years. I breathed in sandy winds and withstood the scorching sun. But in the end, my life ended up like this. After giving everything to my children, I found myself wearing a security guard uniform and raising the barrier. I couldn't even bring myself to say that I felt wronged. Working as a security guard, combined with my pension, provided enough to cover the living expenses for a couple. Medical bills, maintenance fees, insurance premiums, phone bills, food expenses. I thought I wouldn't need money as I got older. But on the contrary, expenses increased as I aged. Still, I held on, driven solely by my pride in never asking my children for help. Then, one day, as I entered the house after work, my wife looked distressed. Honey, Junseo called. What did he say? He said he wants to expand the cafe and is going to take out more loans. The moment I heard those words, all the strain from my body. He said the cafe wasn't doing well, yet now he's talking about expansion. I instinctively knew what that meant. That Junseo was falling apart, and that this collapse would eventually spill over to us as well. It wasn't long after that Junseo announced the cafe expansion. He came to our house and told me, Dad, I'm planning to take out another loan to expand the shop. Hearing that, I couldn't say a word for a while. I couldn't readily understand how someone who said things were already overwhelming could decide to expand. Junseo, didn't you say it was tough already? What are you going to do if you take out another loan on top of that? You need scale to make money. At this size, you can't even cover labor. You have to go big to survive. I tried several times, but Junseo wouldn't listen. Eventually, he took out an additional loan and started the construction to expand the cafe. Around that time, it is very dark. My wife, who already had high blood pressure and took medication for diabetes, began to have trouble sleeping properly as the children's problems piled up. She didn't eat well either. Honey, if you're not feeling well, go see a doctor. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. My wife was always like that. She worried about our children before her own health. She lived with constant anxiety about whether Junseok's cafe would do well and whether Jiyeon was doing well. Yet she tried not to show it. Then one evening I returned home, after finishing my shift as a security guard, to find my wife collapsed on the kitchen floor. Honey, I ran over and shook her, but she didn't open her eyes. My hands were trembling. I couldn't speak properly as I called 119 an ambulance. arrived, and she was rushed to the emergency room. The doctor said she has underlying conditions of high blood pressure and diabetes, and she collapsed due to the accumulation of extreme stress. If we had been even a little later, it could have been dangerous. Hearing those words, my legs gave way. I slumped into a chair and sat there in a daze for a while. It was all my fault that my wife ended up like that. It was my fault for deciding to give everything to our children, and for the heartache I felt afterward, constantly watching their reactions. I finally came to my senses and called Ushemi Anseo. Junseo, Mom has collapsed. Come to the hospital quickly. After a brief silence, Junseo spoke. Dad, I feel like I'm dying right now, too. I'll close the cafe and come as soon as possible. Please try contacting Jiheo first. I looked down at the phone. Seeing my son say he would come after closing the cafe, without even asking if I was okay despite not having collapsed. I felt as if something in my heart had snapped. My daughter Jian arrived, but as soon as she entered the hospital room, this was what she said. Is Mom okay? What about you, Appa? Didn't you come? You're so irresponsible. Mom collapsed and you haven't even shown your face. If you took all of Mom and Dad's assets, you should take responsibility for Mom. I said nothing. I just sat there silently, gazing out the window. I didn't even want to argue. I just felt completely desolate. Worries about the hospital bills washed over me. Fortunately, my wife had insurance that she paid regularly. On top of that, there was a monthly pension. The immediate hospital bills were taken care of. But that wasn't the end of it. Future was the problem. I sat on a chair in the hospital hallway and thought quietly. We were barely managing to make ends meet, with the money earned from work covering hospital bills, maintenance fees, insurance, phone bills, food, pension, and expenses. With my wife's recent reign added to that tight budget, my mind was a mess. I had given everything to my children, yet on the day my wife collapsed, no one was by her side. I was alone. I had lost everything, but the reality was that having given it all away, I had become a true burden. Facing this situation in my 60s, it was not simply a matter of money. It was the pain of the trust I had fought for a lifetime and the expectations I had for my children crumbling all at once. That night, I sat in the hospital chair and stayed awake all night. I stared at the ceiling while listening to my wife's breathing. What had I done so wrong? I had lived so hard. I had given everything for my children, yet no answer came. It was just a long night. Junzeo came to the hospital late that night. He opened the door, stepped inside, took my wife's hand, and said, Mama, I'm sorry. I watched him, saying nothing. During the week my wife was hospitalized, Jian visited twice. Every time he visited, she would badmouth my husband. You even got an apartment, yet you don't even look after Mom. Mom, what are you doing? You don't even show your face. I come even though I have to take care of the kids. Even while listening to her, my wife said, It's fine. Everyone is busy. It's enough that you came and went once. That hurt my heart even more. It was the day the baby was born. As my wife challenged his tone, her shoulders looked much smaller. Her face was also. As we walked down the hospital hallway, we just walked in silence. We took the elevator past the hospital lobby and stepped out through the automatic doors when my wife stopped and took a deep breath of the fresh air. In the taxi on the way home, my wife spoke quietly. Honey, yes. I was foolish. I said nothing, just held her hand tightly. I didn't know that saying we should give it to her while we were still young would become a rope strangling us. I was the one who suggested it first. I'm sorry, honey. Tears welled up in my wife's eyes. My throat tightened, too. What do you have to be sorry about? I made this decision with you. In front of the taxi driver, my wife and I stood silently holding each other's hands. Familiar neighborhood alleys passed by outside the window. Back home, I seated my wife on the sofa and brought her a glass of warm water. She spoke while drinking the water. Honey, I did a lot of thinking in the hospital room for a week. Thinking about what? Why we felt so sorry for our children. Sorry for not being able to do more for them. Sorry for being a burden. Sorry for being a burden because of that guilt we gave them everything. But you know what? After giving them everything, we really did become a burden. Being sick is a burden and contacting them is a nuisance. I want to stop feeling that guilt now. As I listened to her, a corner of my heart felt heavy. I wondered how much she must have cried for those words to come out of her mouth. She continued, quote, "Don't feel sorry for our children anymore. Let's just take care of our own so that later when we get sick and have trouble moving around, we can hire a caregiver without feeling pressured by our children. That is the only way to protect ourselves." I remained silent for a while. My wife was right. It was late, but to avoid relying on our children, we had to protect what was ours to the very end. We needed to be able to hire a caregiver if we were sick, be able to cover our own medical expenses, and live without feeling pressured by our children. That was also the only way to avoid becoming a burden to them. I understand, honey. Let's just take care of ourselves from now on. Let's use this house, our pension, and my earnings solely for our retirement, Pito. My wife nodded. That evening, for the first time in a long while, my wife and I sat down to finish our meal together. There were no special side dishes, just one stew and one serving of kimchi. Yet, for the first time in a long while, the rice went down properly. After finishing our meal, my wife was doing the dishes, and I stood beside her to help. She gave a small smile. "Honey, what is it?" I smiled back simply because I felt it was nice to be together like this, just the two of us. I thought I had given everything to my children and had nothing left, but the most important thing actually remained. This person, the one right beside me. That day, my wife and I sat side by side on the sofa and talked for a long time. We decided to completely let go of the expectations placed upon us by the name of children, and we made a firm promise to live the rest of our lives relying solely on each other. But you see, not long after we made that promise, a call came from the countryside. It was late in the evening when we received the call from the countryside saying that my mother was very... It was an elderly relative living near my mother. You know, mother is not feeling well. Come down quickly. I hung up and stood there in a daze for a while. Mother, who was over a year old this year, I felt she was quite ill, even when I saw her 2 months ago. I should have visited her more often back then. I said to my wife, "Honey, we need to go down to the countryside. Although mother is not feeling well." My wife stood up and said, "I'm going with you. I'm going with you. You haven't been born that long ago." "What do you mean? Everything is out now. Hurry up." That night, my wife and I packed our bags and went down to the countryside. Mother was lying in the hospital. She looked so much smaller. She held my hand and couldn't speak for a while. She only shed tears. I started crying too. "Mother, I should have visited more often. I am sorry." Mother smiled faintly. "It's okay. Mom knows all the hardships my son has gone through." At those words, I held Mother's hand tightly and bowed my head. I cried for a long time, like a child. My wife quietly stroked the ashes beside me, as if to say it was okay to cry more. Mother held on for another week. And one dawn, she quietly closed her eyes. I was there. I was holding Mother's hand. At that moment, something that had been frozen solid inside my heart crumbled in an instant. It was guilt, rougher than 32 years of sandstorms, and sharper than the sound of a calculator used by her children. "Mother." What burst out of my lips was the Saddest and final title a child can offer their parent. I wailed and sobbed. My sobbing echoed down the hospital corridor, but I could not stop. I failed to properly care for my mother, who stayed alone, guarding our country house under the scorching sun at construction sites, looking only for her only son while building others' homes. Using the excuse that I would succeed to show filial piety, I vowed after retirement not to step behind my own children. My mother's future was always relegated to the back burner of my life. Watching me turn away after only briefly stopping by, during the holidays to slip her a few pennies, using business as an excuse, how many more long hours must she have endured alone? I am sorry, Mother. Please do not forgive this unworthy son. Standing before my mother who had lived such a pained life, the pride I had held onto and the resentment I harbored toward my children all felt like stubborn greed. My belated regret spread out as a long wail into the freezing air of the hospital room. Junzaiseo and Jaeyeon also came down during the funeral. For the first time in a long while, the siblings were together in one place. However, it was awkward. We did not speak much to each other. Watching the siblings avoid eye contact, even in front of grandmother's portrait, I wondered how heartbroken Mother must have been if she had seen that. After the funeral, while sorting through her belongings, an elderly relative called over me. Jun, no, Mother left you some land. It was the rural village of Majik that Mother had cultivated her entire life. It was not a large plot of land. However, the relative cautiously added, but you know what? Booge, you know what? I heard there's talk of development around there these days. I heard the land prices have gone up a bit. The words spread quietly. At that moment, I saw the expressions on Junseo and Jiyeon's faces change subtly. It was that evening. Junseo quietly came over to my side. My son, who usually didn't contact me often, suddenly patted my shoulder and said, "Father, it must be very hard for you. I will take care of you now. I've been acting so immaturely all this time." He said this while wiping away his tears. Watching him, I didn't say a word. I only thought to myself. Jaeyeon was even worse than her son, who until recently hadn't even bothered to visit the hospital when he heard his mother had collapsed. She grabbed her daughter-in-law, Sujin, and raised her voice. "I'm going to take care of Dad. You even got the apartment up. It's my turn now." Sujin didn't hold back and retorted, "What are you talking about?" We decided to take care of him. The children were fighting over grandmother's inheritance. It wasn't a fight over who would care for father. It was a fight over who would stay close to guard the land. I watched the scene from a distance. My wife came and stood beside me. Without saying a word, she simply took my arm. That day, I let go of the last hope remaining in my heart. The hope that the children would change someday, that they would reconcile since it would be just the two of us after we died, that they would come running to us if we were in trouble. I completely gave up on that hope in front of Mother's portrait. In the car, on the way back up after the funeral, my wife asked, "Honey, what are you going to do with that land?" I thought for a moment and replied, "It's what Mother left to me. We should use it." My wife quietly nodded. My mother's face kept coming to mind the entire way up to the house. My mother, who endured a lifetime of working in the fields, holding on just to raise one child well. That land was the last thing she left me. I vowed inwardly that I would never give that land to my children. I had to protect my mother's final gift. And a few days later, I gathered my children. It was about a week after the funeral when I called them. Junseo, Jiyeon, their family, and even my daughter-in-law, Suchin, gathered in our living room. For the first time in a long while, the whole family sat together. The atmosphere was strange. Junseo acted affectionately toward me just as he had at the funeral. Jaeyoung glanced at Sujin and spoke to me first. Dad, you must be having a hard time lately, right? I'll come visit often. Listening to those words, I quietly took a sip of tea. Then, putting down my teacup, I began to speak. You all know why I called you, right? No one answered. I called you to talk about Grandma's land. Junzeo and Jiaon's eyes sparkled at the same time. I looked them straight in the eye and continued speaking. There isn't a single penny of that land for you. The living room fell silent for a moment. Junseo spoke first. Father, what do you mean? We're going to take care of you, aren't we? Take care of you? Since when? Junseo was speechless. Jian interrupted. Dad, we are her children. So why aren't you giving us Grandma's inheritance? Shaadovana. Does that make sense? I looked at Jiakong. Jian, do you remember what the hospital said? When Mom collapsed? Jian averted her gaze. They said you have to take responsibility for Mom because they gave it all to you. Do you remember that? Jian said nothing. Junseo also lowered his head. I continued speaking slowly. This money is the last lifeline Grandma left for you, Father. I will use it solely for hospital bills and nursing care until my mom and I die. I won't rely on you either. And you shouldn't rely on me anymore. Junseo raised his voice. Father, we are your children. Isn't this too much? I'm dying right now because of the cafe. So what do you expect me to do? Mom and Dad gifted you the house they owned, and I gave Jian the money I saved up my whole life. I stopped you when you said you were going to open a cafe. I stopped you when you said you were going to take out more loans. Did you listen to me even once back then? Jian started to cry. Dad, how could you do this to us? What did we do so wrong? I looked at Jian. Jian, it's not that I hate you. I love you too. But loving someone and giving them your property are two different things. Dad and Mom, do your best with what you have. I've given you both everything. So don't rely on me anymore. My wife sat quietly, Madara aside me. She didn't add a word. After crying and arguing for a long time, Junseo and Jiaeon finally stood up. As Junseo left, he looked back at the door. Father, you will regret this later. I did not answer. The door was damaged. Only my wife and I remained in the living room. My wife let out a sigh. I was also silent for a while. But it was strange. My heart felt heavy, yet at the same time I felt relieved. It felt like I had finally laid down a heavy burden I had been carrying for so long. My wife said, Honey, you did the right thing. I nodded. Since that day, I have thought about many things. Why did I give everything to my children in advance? Why did I listen to the whispers of those around me who tried to dissuade me? The saying that children won't visit if their parents have nothing pierced me like a dagger. I should have weighed my own old age more heavily than my children's tears. That was the only way to protect my crumbling family relationships and fill my final years with peace of mind, yet I am still working as a security guard. With my pension and the money I earn from security work, the two of us can make ends meet. I am firmly guarding the land my mother left me for our retirement. Junsei contacts me occasionally. He says the cafe is struggling and that we are in the red again this month. I feel sorry for him. However, there is nothing more I can do for them. No, I shouldn't. Jian visits once in a while during the holidays. I am happy to see my grandchild's face. That is enough. My wife is taking good care of her health these days. She makes sure to take her blood pressure and diabetes medication without fail and takes a walk around the neighborhood every morning. When I return home from my security job, breakfast is already prepared. That is my greatest happiness right now. Please keep this in mind, everyone. Do not give to your children in advance. Only when your own pockets are full can you protect your children's safety and your own safety. I am not saying you shouldn't love your children. Love them, but do not love them by mortgaging your own old age. A parent's greatest responsibility is to take full responsibility for their own life until the very end. Taking complete responsibility for your own old age is the ultimate and greatest legacy you can leave to your children. Assets for old age are not weapons to control your children, but a minimum shield to protect your dignity. We must not wait for our children's filial piety, but walk forward with the firmness to protect ourselves. I have decided to live that way from now on. If my story touched you even a little, please show your support by subscribing and liking. I sincerely wish for peace to dwell in your later years. Thank you for watching until the end.